Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you? I'm Tarek. Thank you so much for doing this. I am
Nice to meet you. Absolutely.
mind-boggling. Um,
Happy to do it.
Thank you so much for your time and space and
Yeah.
just being so cool and just doing this with me. To let you know a little bit of myself, I'm originally from Kuwait, very small country in
Cool.
the Middle East. I started studying abroad, and I want to share something a little bit personal with you. I actually was studying journalism at the time at Temple University in Philly, and there was the Philadelphia Film Festival, and The Eyes of My Mother was one of the screenings then and there. And so I went and saw it during a time where I was misdiagnosed with melanoma.
Ooh,
Yeah, so I went and your film just got, I just started watching films to just kind of forget about my situation then and there. But I remember what I stood up, I looked behind me, there was a group of friends, I think, and I told them, good luck sleeping tonight. And I walked away and they it gave me an experience, and it gave me something to think about, and it really was, maybe if not one of the things that pushed me to even switch. Moment I learned I don't have melanoma, I switched my major to film. I studied at university, and then
nice.
I graduated from Boston University in film and television, and now I'm in grad school doing this. Um,
Nice.
Soon heading to the field. Um, so to start with, I wanted you to share a bit with me how you got into film. What inspired you to get into film? Did you always know you wanted to do filmmaking?
Yeah, I grew up doing theater, like community theater, like local stuff, like terrible shows, as an actor. And when I was probably like 12, I was in an NYU student's short film, and I was like, whoa, this is cool. Like, I like all the lights, and I like all the gear. Um, and I had always made like Lego movies, like stop motion things with my Legos. And so I loved movies. And then like it as soon as I realized that like you could have a job making movies, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, that's I want to do that. And so I went to NYU Film School.
Right.
And then after college, NYU does this thing on like the first day of school. There's like 100 kids each year, and they have us all in a room, and they're like, raise your hand if you want to be a director. And like every kid raises their hand, and they're like, cool. None of you will be directors, so pick a different job in movies that you want to do. And NYU is very production oriented, and I think that the the thing that they're most successful at is creating crew members, DPs, gaffers, grips, like production jobs, because they really do value, like, we want to try to get you a job after college, and like if you want to be a director, we might not be successful at doing that. So, but I always felt like, well, someone has to be the director. Like, so I'd like that asshole to be me. And when I graduated from college, I was broke. And my attitude though is like, if I take jobs, and I don't know that this is good advice, but this is what I did. My thing was like, if I take jobs that aren't being a director on sets, I'm going to get stuck in that thing. Like, I saw other friends of mine be like, I need money, so I'm going to go PA on a movie, or I'm going to go do this random job. I'm going to go be a sound mixer on this thing. And I saw a lot of those people just get stuck in that track, because the way film production works is you finish one job, and then the guy who hired you on that job calls you for the next one, and it's
But
just this like endless cycle. So I was just like, I need to make money, so I'm just gonna do like odd jobs. And the thing that I did the most was I drew concert posters for like venues. And So I would be at a lot of shows and I would go around to the bands afterwards and be like, hey, I'm a filmmaker. If you need a music video, like hit me up. And I would literally go to a show every single night and just give out my business cards being like, I'm a music video director. Even though like the only thing I
Yeah.
had was my final film from film school. But at least it was like my movie from film school was very, it looked like a 70s movie. It felt like a 70s movie. So my whole thing was always like, I can do throwback feeling stuff really well. Like I can make you a music video that looks like an old movie. And I started slowly like getting jobs um, until like a few years into it, I was doing like 3, 4 music videos a month and it was crazy.
Wow.
Mind you, I wasn't doing like Rihanna videos. You know, I was doing like indie bands in New York. But it was paying my rent and I was getting to be on set a lot and direct a lot. And I got a call one day from a buddy of mine from film school being like, you remember that movie Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene? It's like, yeah, of course. And he was like, well, those guys just made a movie and they need someone to edit with the director for like a couple weeks. And I was like, I'm not an editor, so nah, sorry. And he was like, you should really consider doing this because these guys are like really doing it. They're older than us. They're doing what we want to do. They're at least good people to meet. So I was like, I don't know. I'll give you like a week and see how it goes. So I met with the director, we started editing, and kind of immediately I saw like how much different a movie, like I had never seen movie footage before, you know, like dailies of a movie and like watching a scene when it's not cut together and you're like, oh yeah, this looks terrible. And but it was exciting to be like working on a movie and I liked the filmmakers. And so I just kept on and it was kind of like my first time just hanging out and talking to people who made movies that weren't like celebrities, you know, and were just like young filmmakers doing it, like scrapping it all together, and it worked. So I was enjoying hanging out with them, working with them, and I was doing like odd jobs for them. And then one day they were literally like, "Do you want to make a movie?" I was like, "More than anything, yes." Um, and I had I had written something that I always thought was going to be my first movie. It was like a hacker thriller. Um, and and they were like, nah, don't don't do that. Like, don't try to make an action movie the first movie you make. Like, try to think of something smaller and doable. And their thing to me was,
It's this is crazy
we
because
have a
I think of you as a horror director. So to think that you wanted to do a thriller first.
yeah, well, and you know, it's funny because when we when we were making Eyes of My Mother, well, they had kind of said to me like, we have a friend who has money to finance movies, not a lot, but if you could figure out how to make a movie for 100 grand, we can make this happen. So I was like, okay, as small a cast of characters as possible, as few locations as possible, and like, what's the one thing that like I can do well for no money, but it'll seem like I have more money. And for me, that was like gore and violence, and it's what I had always done in my music videos. So I was like, I can do gore for cheap. Like I know how to do that, and it'll make it feel like it cost more money. And the truth is, when we made the movie, you know, Silence of the Lambs is one of my favorite movies of all time. And to me, I always think it's funny when people call that a horror movie because I'm like, no, it's a thriller. Like a horror movie is like haunted houses, slashers. Like just because you have a serial killer doesn't mean that it's a horror movie. I was like, I'm making a thriller. But as we were gearing up, like as I was kind of like figuring out what I wanted to make, Babadook, It Follows, Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, like that whole run of movies had just come out. And it was like, oh,
Yeah.
the like definition of what makes a horror movie has changed.
Right.
And what people's appetite for this has totally changed. Because I loved horror movies, but like I said, like when I think horror, I think of like Wes Craven. And I had always loved Japanese horror because it was so much more hardcore than we did it in America.
I I
Um,
I noticed. I noticed. You did both
yeah,
the Grudge and Piercing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And um and so like I loved that stuff. And so to me, I was just like, I'm just gonna make a movie that me and my friend would sit on the couch and watch late at night and be like, I was the kid who like wanted to find movies that no one else had seen and be like, you got to see this. So I was like, let's make one of those. A movie that feels like it's really deep cut. It's like bottom shelf at the video store, really obscure, and let's just make it like uh, um the movie has to be like, my favorite movies were always ones where you're like, oh God, I can't believe they're still going, and why is it getting more and more intense? Um, and we kind of treated it, we were like, we have to treat this like a drama. That's like what the filmmakers, my mentors, had said to me. Antonio Campos is like still to this day like my mentor, and he was like, no matter what the genre is, treat it like you're making a drama. Don't treat her like she's a villain, don't treat her like she's a serial killer. You're making a drama about loneliness, and it just happens to have some intense shit. Um, and so here I am, like making a black and white movie in a foreign language that I don't speak. And I was like, no one in the world is going to see this movie. And me and my friends will watch this. It'll be cool that I got to make a movie, but no one in the world is ever going to see this. And I was totally cool with that.
I was gonna ask if
Because I was like,
that discouraged you at all, thinking that way, or
well, I was kind of like, I to this day, I've made 4 movies now. I'm in post on one right now.
knock on wood.
And um I my attitude still is like, I feel like a kid who stole my parents' car keys, and I'm just racing before I get caught. Like one day someone's going to be like, why did we let you do this? Like you're not allowed to do this anymore. So I was just like, I felt like I was getting away with something. And I was like, if this doesn't work, whatever, I'll just keep making music videos. And kind of at the same time that I started making Eyes on My Mother, it was the first time that like my music video career was like finally doing something. Like I was getting labels reaching out with bigger budgets. So I was like, if this movie doesn't work, I'm just gonna go back to making music videos. So like I'm just gonna make something that I think is cool, and no one's ever gonna see this, so it doesn't fucking matter. And I think the greatest thing that I wish I could recreate is that feeling of like, I don't care about anything other than what I think is good. Like, I'm not thinking about the audience. I'm not thinking about selling this movie to a distributor. I'm not thinking about festivals. I'm just here in the moment being like, do I think this is cool? Um, and I didn't realize how incredible that would be. Um, because then, like, my producers were like, we're going to submit the movie to Sundance. And I was like, oh, huh, that's funny. And then it got in, and I was like, what? And then people liked it, and I was even more shocked. And then, like, suddenly I had a career, and I was like, what off this tiny move black and white Portuguese movie that no one ever was supposed to see.
So I want to say though, it does show that may not, you were not concerned with how it would be received? Because the way I see this film, I'm a huge fan of horror, but watching it, it is non-conventional. It is not,
Yeah,
it is not, it didn't feel like it was catered towards an audience to it didn't feel like it wanted to follow horror tropes and cliches, even those that work.
yeah,
It felt like it had stand alone horror film that was also beautiful. It was shot beautifully. You have all these like wide shots of the location, and it's in black and white, but it's beautiful.
yeah.
Point that when you get to the gore, it's like almost like, okay, well, this is part of the beauty, almost like a usual gore. I'm like, oh, we want to look away. This one, I'm like, no, this tells us more about the character. It's part of the scene.
Yeah, and I think it's always so interesting because it's like, okay, the black and white came from, I had done a bunch of music videos in black and white and kind of realized that um like, okay, so I love the Chandler Park movie Stoker, and the the exterior shots look so weird and lit in such an odd way to me, and I was like, how did they do, why does it look like this? And I realized that they were doing night for day and day for night and lighting everything. So they're shooting like day scenes at night and lighting them, and shooting night scenes during the day and tenting them. And I was like, oh, I love that. So I would go to my DP and I'm like, how do we do that on this movie? He's like, we can't afford to do that. But if we shoot in black and white, we can use colored filters to make the sky go black and make it look like we had enough lights to shoot a gigantic night exterior when really it's just the sun, but because we're shooting black and white, the sky looks black, but no
Wow.
one will know.
Yeah,
We
I
were
was
like,
full.
all right, great, sick. And then the black and white just helped us in so many ways and things like that, that um it was a technical thing, but also I was, if there was any like horror movie that I was trying to emulate, it was like the 60s, like American Gothic thriller, like Straight Jacket or A Night of the Hunter, Psycho. And my whole thing was like, everyone looks back at Psycho like, well, it was the 60s. Of course, it was in black and white. It's like, no, no, color was the norm at that point. Hitchcock had made color movies. He actively chose to make that movie in black and white. And most 60s movies, especially if they were made by bigger directors that are black and white, that was a choice, not like a age thing. So I was like, okay, like the black and white is a choice. It helps us with all this technical stuff. And then like the Portuguese came from, I had made a music video with the girl Kika who plays the main role, and she was from Portugal. Her English wasn't great, so I was like, "All right, you're speaking Portuguese," and it was kind of just like so many things that made sense to me because I didn't know what I didn't know. And and it all and it all worked. and and I think it was also helpful, like my crew that had made all my film school movies had also made all my music videos. I brought that entire crew onto Eyes, and so it was like everyone knew each other. It felt like, a real family affair. Everyone knew me, everyone knew what I liked. Even the actors were mostly my friends and people that I'd worked with before. And there's just this like magical experience of like shit just accidentally working, but us also just making, it was everyone's first movie. So there was this energy of like, we just want to make the thing that we think is the best. And that's all we care about. Um and it worked. And I like wish more than anything that I could like recreate that, like I don't care. This is what makes sense to me. I'm just doing it and not second guessing anything because I don't have the time or the money to second guess myself.
Right.
Um, and so that's like what I always tell people when people are like, "What's your advice for making a movie or making your first movie?" It's like, don't wait for permission. Like no one's ever gonna like my situation where someone was like, "Do you want to make a movie?" was super unique. Um, and more often than not, no one's ever gonna ask you to do it. So just go do it for whatever you have. Like movies are made for $10,000 now. Technology has gotten to a place, an audience's tolerance for like lower fidelity filmmaking is higher than it ever has been. So it's like, go make a movie, don't ask for permission. And the first movie is the only time that you're ever going to have to only listen to you, to like only do what you think is right and only do what you think is right. Do not care about anyone else's opinion because even when I made Piercing, it's, the same group of people made the movie, but there's now like in the back of my head a pressure to make like I have a movie that people like now, and now I have to make another movie that people like, and
Right.
that fucks with you. And I think that I got lucky. Piercing was kind of also unique because after I went to Sundance with Eyes of My Mother, I like got an agent and a manager, and like I was living in New York and I came out to LA for the first time and was meeting people. Um, and so like Eyes of My Mother premiered January of 2016 at Sundance, and I got the job on The Grudge um like a month later. And but someone had said to me, making a studio movie takes a really long time and you're probably going to be in development for at least a year. So the
How
guy
long
who
did
had financed,
how long did
what was that?
how long did the Eyes of My Mother take?
So I shot Eyes of My Mother in 17 days, and then I cut it in 21 days.
What?
And then we got into Sundance, and this is now, so it's like December, a month before Sundance. We get in. I'm like still cutting, and they're like, "You don't have time to cut anymore. Let's put in 48 hours straight over the weekend." But now we actually have to like finish and sound. We have to like color correct and sound design the movie because it's going to play in a theater. Um, so I literally, yeah, cut the movie in 21 days, like 3 days of sound mix, 4 days of color, and then made a DCP and flew to Sundance. So
Wow.
I was like, I made a movie in 2 months. And then now someone's telling me that like writing the script is going to take a year. So I was like, so my financier from Eyes of My Mother had made money off the sale of the movie. So he came to me and he was like, let's make another movie real quick before you have to go make The Grudge. So I was like, I want the rights to this book. And Piercing was kind of a similarly unique experience in that I knew I was going to make The Grudge, which was going to be by far the
You
biggest
knew.
movie that I'd made. And that was going to be a louder movie than whatever indie movie I made before that. And they'd probably come out around the same time. So I was like, and I was also kind of, because Eyes of My Mother is so like serious and bleak, everyone when I was like meeting people, they were like, "Oh, so you like really intense shit?" It's like I do, but I also kind of like how like Korean movies are violent but still playful, and like they don't take themselves so seriously. That's another side of me. And everyone was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," but the dark, bleak stuff, right? And it's like, okay. And so Piercing, I was like, I have to prove that like I can be like a little fun. And I was like, again, The Grudge is going to overshadow this. So I'm just going to make a movie that is fun for me to make. And I love 70s Italian giallo movies, so I want to make one of those. So let's bang that out. So I made that really fast, and I made that while I was writing The Grudge. Um, and then The Grudge was a nightmare and was like
Well,
every bad studio story you've ever heard all wrapped up in one movie.
I wanted see okay, I wanted to ask a little bit about the Grudge separately because I also want to hear about the logistics, but I want to circle back to one thing because I think it
Yeah.
would be really beneficial for me and my classmates. So you said when you graduated film school and you worked on this film because an opportunity had struck, but how did you come about moving to LA and finding an agent and being in the business and not just doing freelance work for like music videos and because we're so
Yes.
let me be honest with you, we're all here like kind of frightened. We're like, oh, we're gonna graduate soon and we don't know what to do next.
Yeah. I mean, the getting Eyes of My Mother, it was totally outside the industry. And it was just my friend, the people who I'd become friends with through this editing job had access to financing. And mind you, Eyes of My Mother only cost 130 grand, which, when you're trying to raise money is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of movies is not.
Did you pitch it
Um,
to
so
producers?
what was that?
Did you pitch it to producers at all?
No, it was literally like the filmmakers that I was working with, they were like, we'll produce the movie. And so they were like, write a script. I wrote the script and we like worked on it together. Um, and their whole thing was they were called Borderline Films. They don't work together anymore. But it was three directors, Antonio Campos, who had made like After School and Simon Killer, um, Sean Durkin, who had made Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, and Josh Mond, who had just made James White, which is the movie that I was working on. And their kind of setup was like one of them makes a movie, and then the other two produce, and then the next movie, a different one of them directs, and then the other two produce, and they would just rotate. They were getting to a point where they were starting to feel like they wanted to get into bigger movies and get out of the indie world. So they were trying to get like younger filmmakers to kind of do that with. So I was like the experiment. Um, but I didn't have an agent, I didn't have reps, I didn't have anything other than these guys who were just, I was 25 at the time and they were 31. So, they had each made, only one of them had made two movies, and each one of them had each made one movie. Um, and but we made it, they were other NYU kids, they were just older than me. um they all had reps and stuff, but I didn't. And I made As My Mother with no one, and the guy who financed it was just a rich kid that was my age. And when Eyes got into Sundance, though, everyone, that's when you start getting phone calls. Like when you get into Sundance and you don't have reps, people start being like, well, I'll rep you. And I ended up, the guys who had produced for me, they all had the same agent, same manager, same lawyer. So those people were all like, do you want to sign with us? So I was like,
Wow.
yeah, that seems easy. Um, and then I started coming out to LA for like meetings. They'd be like, come out for a week. We'll set up a bunch of meetings for you. Um, and then I got The Grudge. I was still living in New York, going back and forth. I grew up right outside of the city, and then I lived in New York City for 10 years. So I
Wow.
was like, fuck LA. LA sucks. I'm a New Yorker. And then as The Grudge was like starting to actually like move towards production, I was on a phone call and they were like, so for post, you'll move out to LA for 18 months. And I was like, move out to LA for 18 months. Like, it's not like, oh, dip over for a quick 18 months. That's like,
That's
I
it.
have to move to LA. They're like, well, no, you don't have to, but my wife is from LA, so she had kind of been looking for reasons. Her family's all here, so she had been looking for reasons to come back to LA. So I was like, I mean, if at the end of making this movie we want to move back to New York, we can, but until I'm done with this movie, we have to move to LA. So I was kind of forced into it. Um, but I think it's always good. My attitude was always like, I don't want to move to LA until I have to, because I just built, to me, the best thing about film school is like the connections you make. The way I met the producers was like through the guy who had like been on all my film school shorts, and he was just like my buddy. And he, after film school, I was doing music videos, he was doing other things, but then we reconnected, and that led to me making movies. And so many of the people that worked on those movies were other people that I went to film school with, and it was just, I had no connections in LA, whereas I did have connections in New York, even if they weren't like connections of people in the
Oh
business. It
yeah.
was people who could do the jobs that I would need someone to do should I get the opportunity.
Right.
So I really like built out my base in New York, and then we honestly all kind of moved to LA at the same time. Like Eyes and my mother was like a kind of trajectory for all of us, because like, you know, whether it was the department heads or the other producers, like everyone suddenly, people were paying attention. So we all kind of moved out to LA at the same time. Like my like circle of film people is still like the same people that I hung out with in film school. And they're still the first people that I send a script to. But it was really like things happen things happen when they're supposed to, in that like if you have to chase down an agent, you're probably not ready to have an agent yet, you know. They're such a shark of a job that like if if you're in a festival, like one of the big festivals, someone's going to come knocking on your door. And my advice to people is always like, if someone offers to rep you, provided they're from any reputable agency, like don't sign with a guy who's gonna like, you know, steal your money and doesn't have any other clients and is just like a random guy on Craigslist. But you don't have to, you know, you don't have to sign with CAA, UTA, WME. Like there's plenty of other agencies
What good traits
that
should we look for when it comes to agency hunting?
someone that you like. That's like the biggest thing. And I think it's kind of that way with, first and foremost, I have to like you, whether that's you know, camera operator, producer, an agent, a manager. You have to you have to trust these people and spend so much time with these people that if you don't like them first and foremost, it's never going to work.
Not-
Like
Yeah.
I always say, like my test is, could we be best friends? Like when we inevitably have to go on vacation together, i.e. like spend a week in Utah to go to Sundance together, am I going to hate spending time with you?
Right.
Because if I am, this is going to suck. And you know, I think that it's like, do you like them, and do they don't have to share your taste, but they have to understand your taste.
That's something I was going to ask. Do they have to share your taste? They don't, you say.
No, but they have to get it, and they have to know, they have to understand it in the way that, like, for instance, my manager, I love my manager to death. She is absolutely incredible. She does not like horror movies, but she knows what type of horror movie I like, and has good taste in movies. So she can watch a movie, read a script, give notes that are honestly for me super helpful, because it's not coming from a place of I've seen a million horror movies. It's coming from a place of I just like movies. Um, and her taste is good enough to help me sculpt and make things better. But she also can read a script that's been submitted to me or a script that's going around and be like, oh, Nick would like this because she understands what my
Understand.
taste
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing. And you'll meet people who don't get it, or who try to push you away from something that you like in favor of something more commercial. And there's people who too, like, I went into it being like, would I love to make a movie that like a ton of people see? Yeah. But that's not my number one priority. Like, my number one priority is like making weird stuff that I think is cool, and my taste is specific. So I just need people to understand what I like, so that when they're talking to a producer at whatever company and they're talking about me and what I like and what I'm looking for in a way
That's
that is
accurate.
accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. So in the back of my head, I was thinking, The Eyes of My Mother has such a complex narrative and a non-conventional story that how did Nick pitch that? But it kind of makes sense that you had a team that trusted your vision, how had worked with you for so long that they just
Yeah.
know what they're getting themselves into.
Well, and I made so I when I the first script that I wrote of Eyes of My Mother was way more like midnight movie slasher than it was drama. Um and and one of my NYU professors read it and was like, listen, you're like dancing on the line between like complex drama that's violent and then just like a horror movie. And he was like, the complex drama angle is more interesting. Chase that more. Um, and I chased that more. It felt better. And then, even still, when I had the script, um, I don't want to make it seem like it was like, yeah, they just let me do whatever I wanted, because there was a moment where it was like, we don't know what this is. It's not a traditional horror movie. It doesn't like meet any. There is no like comp that you could be like, oh, well, it's like this movie. And they were like, and you're talking about a lot of stylistic things that, like, why is it in Portuguese? Why is it black and white? So I started feeling like they were losing trust in me, and I took my crew. I and was basically just like, pulled every favor I could, got every bit of free gear that I could, and I spent a weekend making a short. That was kind of just a proof of concept
Mm.
of the movie. So I shot the sequence when the guy escapes, when she takes the guy out of the
Oh
barn, he
gosh.
escapes,
Oh gosh,
and then
yes.
they're running. And so I shot that whole scene. We reshot it for the movie, but that was like the chunk of
Horrific,
movie that
yes.
I shot, being like, this is what the movie is. This is how we're covering scenes. This is how we're handling the violence. This is what the energy is. I shot that, I cut that together, and I showed everyone, and they were like, oh, we get it now. This is cool. Yeah,
So
let's do it.
prior to you shooting this, was there a lookbook? Was there
Oh yeah.
and
I'm
that
big on
still
my lookbooks.
and you're saying even with the lookbooks, storyboards maybe and everything, sometimes you need to go the extra mile and even shoot a little thing to prove to them.
Yeah, well, and I was kind of feeling like, I was like, I feel like I'm so close to this working, but I'm also so close to all of this falling apart.
Oh
So
no.
my attitude was just like, I have to do everything possible for them to be like, we can't not make this. Like, we have to make this.
Gotcha.
And the lookbooks, over the years, my lookbooks have gotten more and more involved. But that, like, my Eyes of My Mother lookbook wasn't as impressive as like my piercing lookbook was. And like I started learning the power of a good lookbook. And when you can be super, super, super specific down to like what a prop looks like,
Oh wow.
people look at it, and even if they don't get even if they don't see it the way you see it, they see that you've thought about everything. And that is what I've come to learn gets me jobs more than anything else, is that like you might not get it, but I've thought of everything. And that most people are just looking for someone who has an opinion about everything, story, character, but also like what color socks someone wears, you know? Because
Right.
that's all you are as the director. You don't actually do, the director doesn't actually do anything. It's always weird being on set 'cause you're like, like functionally, other than like brief moments of talking to actors, I'm not actually doing anything other than answering questions. All you are is like an answer generator. And so you just have to have thought of everything. So when someone's like, hey, what should this look like? You're like, oh, it should look like this. And they're like, great, cool, thanks. You know, that's like what the job is,
Um,
having answers.
it's funny because you mentioned a point that was also told to me recently. I talked a little bit with Janet Fitch, the author of The White Oleander and Painted Black, and she, Painted Black is a film that was based on her book, and she tells the story of how the filmmaker contacted her agent multiple times, and she's gotten so many no's, this filmmaker, from Janet Fitch, and up until the last point where Janet was like, this person is passionate, this filmmaker knows what she wants to do, and she finally said, sure, yes. So you mentioned
Yeah.
a very similar point of passion. If you can translate your passion via lookbook, a cut, and tell people that you know what you're doing, then it sells. They don't have to necessarily understand it, but they have to trust in your passion.
Yeah. And like the fire of like, I always approach everything like, I'm gonna do this whether you say yes or not. The question is, do you want to jump on the already moving train? Um, and when you treat things like that and you're like, I have to do this, it's infectious to people. Um and most people in the industry are like really afraid of FOMO. And they're like, don't, if something seems like it's gonna be cool, they don't want to not be a part of
Right.
it. So it's like, and I think it's also, it's weird to me when people, like, we get to play pretend for a living. Like the job that we get to do is ridiculous. And it it has to come from a place of like play and fun. And you want everyone to feel like, I love this so much. Because if you don't, like, making a movie is fucking hard and it's gonna take a long ass time. So they need to try, like, there's so many things beyond just like the project. Like so much of it is buying into the filmmaker as a person. And again, it goes back to the thing like, do I want to be friends with this person? Like when you go make a movie and you sign on with a producer who you didn't know beforehand, they're about to be your best friend for the next 2 years of your life. So you better love them and they better love you. Um, and I think for me, it's always like, yeah, who's the most passionate and who's the most excited? And yeah,
Now I want to jump into a little bit of the Grudge. So this
yeah,
was you said you were writing the script. I personally, I would be frightened. This has its huge fandom. It has been we all grew up watching The Grudge, and like the Japanese movies, and then the American movies, and then there's the novel, and then there's manga, and then there is fan art, and then there's fan fiction, and there's video games. It's a huge responsibility. How did that come
yeah.
about? How did it reach you? How did you start writing the script? How did you approach it? Were you frightened?
So I in like that first round after Sundance of like meeting companies, I was in Hollywood, there's always like properties, like IP that's going around that people are looking for takes of how to remake. And at the time, there was a movie of a remake of Turning of the Screw, which came out a couple years ago, called The Turning, with Mackenzie Davis. And I went in to pitch on that, and I was pitching this guy Roy Lee, who, unbeknownst to me at the time, he's a producer here, but he's kind of the one who's responsible for bringing The Grudge to America and The Ring to America. He produced all those J horror movies in the early 2000s, like Dark Water and all those.
Wow.
And so I'm pitching my take on Turning of the Screw, and I started just talking about how much I love J horror and how I think that like the American jump scare obsession is tiresome and doesn't work the way people think it does, and how J horror gets you just as scared, if not more, with slower burns. And he was like, if you were to ever remake a J horror movie, what would it be and why? And I was like, not realizing that he had produced the Sarah Michelle Gellar Grudge movies, I was like, I would remake The Grudge because the American Grudge movies suck and they don't do the Japanese series any justice.
You said that.
Yeah. Um, and he was like, I produced them. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I was like, listen, you know, I was like, so, and he was, but to be fair, he was like, listen, I get it. Like the Grudge movies don't hold up. And I, when the Grudge movies first came out, I was at an age when the American ones came out, I was at an age where I saw Scary Movie before I saw The Grudge. So by the time I saw The Grudge, it was a joke to me.
Oh wow.
Um,
Yeah.
it was so silly to see this like little boy meow and like watch this woman crawl backwards down the stairs. Like Scary Movie had made a joke out of it. So it
Right.
was so dumb. And like my generation of movie watchers, like The Ring, awesome. The Grudge with Sarah Michelle Gellar fucking sucks. And it had made a lot of money in the box office because at the time no one quite knew the difference between The Ring and The Grudge. To this day, people are still like, "Oh, you made The Grudge? Is that the one with the girl coming out of the
Right.
TV?" It's like, nope.
Right. Right.
Um,
It's a pain in my
and
pain in the ass.
yeah, so like the Sarah Michelle Gellar Grudge movies, I thought were terrible. The Japanese Grudge movies, though, had this like energy that felt so. They're especially the early ones when they're shot on VHS still. It feels like or a mini DV. It feels like you're watching a home movie that ghosts just happen to be in the background of. Like they're not trying to oversell you on the haunting. And I thought that that was so much more powerful. And in this world where movies are getting more grounded and horror movies are not what they used to be, there's a wider range of what you can do. I basically pitched them like True Detective meets Seven, but it's The Grudge. And the thing that I had felt got lost in the American remakes was that all the Japanese movies are police procedurals. You start on a crime, you start on a regular person. It's like a teacher, a real estate agent. Like there's always just a regular person who
Right.
comes to this house for a random reason, and then it becomes a police procedural. And the American movies had not done that because they had really tried to prioritize having a big American star at the center, and they just rebuilt the structure. And I really loved that all the Japanese movies, like while the American remakes are still non-linear, they're not like chaptered the way that they're not chaptered the way the Japanese movies are, where it's like you get 30 minutes of one character and then you never see that character ever again. Then you get 30 minutes of a new character, then you never see that character ever again. So I was like, there are all these things that feel so quintessentially Grudge to me that aren't in the American remake. So I was like, I want to pretend like the American remakes never, and also in like the legacy of the Grudge, all the Japanese movies are one canon. All the manga, all the video games, that's all one canon. And then the American remakes are like a separate thing. So I was like, I want to disregard the American remakes and I want to make a canon American installment into the original Grudge series.
Mm.
Like, we will acknowledge the case that happened in Japan, we will acknowledge the Japanese movies, and this is just a continuation of the Japanese franchise.
And that's why it wasn't called
So
like The Grudge 4.
yeah, and initially it was going to be called like The Grudge, like Black Seed or some stupid shit like that. You know, it was going to have like a subtitle on it, in the way that all the Ju-on movies do, where it's like Ju-on Black Ghost, Ju-on White Ghost, Ju-on The Grudge, Ju-on The Curse.
They
So
had
it
a
was
TV
gonna, we
show
were gonna do
recently.
that.
They had a TV show
What'd you
recently.
say?
They had a
Yeah.
Ju-on TV show recently.
Yep. So, you know, so we were gonna do that, and I wrote the script. It took like, I don't even know, it took probably at least over a year of just like development notes and like, you know, making it, doing notes with the producers, then doing notes for the studio. And the script that they greenlit and that we shot, if you like go on Google and type in Nicolas Pesce The Grudge script, the script that you can find on the internet is my script that they greenlit. And that script I am super proud of. And I like made sure that it connected to the novels, the video games, the manga, the movies. Like, it was so just everything that a real Grudge fan would want in a movie. Um, and I shot the movie. It was, at the time, I was like, I loved every second of it because it was the first time I had like money to do what I wanted. Like, I'll never forget, there was a day where I was like at the monitor with my DP and I was like, man, I wish this could be a crane shot. And someone was like, you want this to be a crane shot? This could be a crane shot. And I was like, what? Like, yeah, we'll just unpack the crane. Give me 20 minutes. It'll be a crane
Wow.
shot. And I was just like,
Right.
whoa. Um, and
I mean, this sounds awesome for me. I'm in
yeah,
school. If we don't have a crane, we don't have a crane. Like, get on my shoulder and
exactly. Well,
listen, I'm a crane.
and that, and that's what I was used to. And I was just like, man, and I was just saying it like, man, this would be cool if it was a crane
Right,
shot.
right.
Um, so it was the making of the movie, and I had made, and I was doing it with my DP who had shot Piercing, one of the producers who had done Piercing with me.
Your
So
team,
it
yeah.
was like, I'm there, I'm like with my team. I have like real actors in it. I have real money. No one's saying no. The studio is loves the dailies. Everyone is so happy. I go into post. I'm working with a composer that I've like always dreamed of working with. Um, Everything's going great. Director's cut finishes. I screen the movie for Sony, and they're like, listen, this isn't as traditional as we were hoping for, but there's something very adult about it. Um, True Detective is huge. This kind of has a True Detective vibe. It's kind of fun that this is like a sophisticated Grudge. It's like not for kids. And they were all super into it. And everyone's high fiving. We're like, yeah, we did it. And then now we have to test the movie. So, you know, when you preview a studio movie, they literally go to a mall in the middle of nowhere, and everyone who walks by, they're like, do you want to come see a free movie? Do you want to come see a free movie? Do you want to come see a free movie? So you get just 400 random people who said yes to going to see a free movie that night. Come and watch your movie, score it, give comments, write notes. And at the end of the night, you get like the score for how your movie did. And we did terribly. And it was it's a room full of 416-year-olds who are like, the movie's too sad, the movie's too dark, like, and the biggest thing that came up was, for the generation of movie viewers younger than me who didn't have all the baggage with the Grudge, the Sarah Michelle Gellar Grudge, they looked at the Sarah Michelle Gellar Grudge movies the way we look at like 80s horror movies, where like, is the quality of an 80s horror movie very high? For the most part, no, but like, you forgive it because of the time and there's a charm there. They had for all these kids who weren't born when The Grudge came out, they all looked back at it like, well, it's dated. Of course it was cheesy, but like, we were hoping, everyone in that audience was hoping that this was going to be a fun, kind of stupid, tongue-in-cheek movie. Like, the way the new Halloween movies are kind of tongue-in-cheek, like they're kind of poking fun while still trying to be serious, but it's still like fun more than it's like we're making
Almost,
a real
almost
movie.
camp.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's what people were hoping for out of my movie. And that is not what I had delivered. And thus began the like year of studio execs trying to figure out how to make the movie more fun. In a movie that there was no fun in that movie in the first place. And
So
now they're trying
after
to,
after the showing, there was more
yeah,
shooting afterwards? Like you went back to
yeah,
production?
yep. Which is pretty standard on studio movies. But and reshoots can look like anything. Like, listen, on the one hand, I always knew I was going to do reshoots. Like, that was always part of basically every studio movie plans for reshoots. And to me, I was like, listen, how often have you made something where it's like, when you're watching it in the edit, you're like, oh, I could have done that shot better, or I wish I had done this
Right,
like this. So
all the time.
I looked at reshoots like an opportunity to fix that kind of stuff. They looked at reshoots as an opportunity to stuff new shit into the movie. And it was a a year of just like, well, what if we try this? At first, just in the writing phase of like, what if we try this? What if
And
we try this? What
when
if
you
we
say
try
they,
this?
who is in this
The
position?
studio
The
execs.
studio
So
exec.
it's, yeah. So basically, like, the way the Grudge was structured was like, there was me, and then there was the production company.
Uh-huh.
So like, it's the company that's like actually functionally making the movie. Um, we had Sam Raimi, who was just like the producer, who, was basically, they do this with a lot of, anytime that like you're a first time studio director, they give you a studio director who functions as your producer to basically like help you through stuff, and for them to feel like, if I fuck up, Sam can come in and save the day. So I had the producers from the production company, I had Sam, I had his producers, and then I had the studio execs. So you're talking about 10 people
Right.
who all have different opinions and all think they know how to make the movie better. And it just becomes a tricky uh it becomes a tricky thing just to balance all the voices, and then to know who to trust, who has your best interest at heart, who has other motives for their notes. But
Did
it
you feel
also,
pressure
like,
at all were you comfortable to say no to some of these like big people in the industry to be like, I hear you, but no.
yeah. But the trickiest thing to navigate is, you're in it for so long, it's such a marathon, that after a year of talking about, it could be this, 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 you start to kind of like lose your own grounding of like, what was my initial intention? and then you get to a point where it's like you have to do this. And there does come a point in studio filmmaking where they say you have to go do this, and that's the trade-off of like, yeah, you're getting paid well,
Right.
but you as the director on an indie movie, if there's a dispute, the director wins, and that's just how it works. On a studio movie, if there's a dispute, the studio wins. And I also suffered from the production company that was making the movie. Halfway through making the movie, got bought by Lionsgate, and the guy who had been my producer and had been the one fighting for me the whole time now was the president of Lionsgate and was no longer on my movie. So the one person I had fighting for me is now gone. Um, and there's a lot of politics, and that I think was the hardest thing for me to navigate, was that like you have to, oh wait, sorry, one second. Oh, give me 1 second. I just have to go answer the door real quick.
Lords.
Hey, awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I'm back.
So
You
did you
know, just
ended up making maybe the first time ever where you ended up making a film that is it exactly how you wanted it to be in this instance?
yeah, no, the final movie is not 100% my movie. And there are chunks of it that are, and chunks of it that I'm super proud of.
And as a director,
But
I can tell, I can if it were me, that kind of hurts, right?
oh yeah, that's brutal. It sucks. and I think what's even harder is when you have like press comes out and reviews your movie, and the things that they have problems with,
Are
you're
things that you
like,
didn't,
yeah, I
yeah,
have a problem with that too.
yeah,
And now everyone thinks that you thought, everyone thinks that you made that decision. And it's like, I didn't make that decision. And it's hard because you don't really have an opportunity to be all that vocal about it, because the time that you have to talk about the movie, you do all that stuff before the movie comes out. So even though I knew that there was stuff in there that I wasn't super, 100% on, you don't want to shoot the movie in the foot before it comes out, because if, let's say this movie, everyone loves it, and let's say the studio is right about everything, and you go and the movie comes out and it's a hit, you don't want to be the asshole who's like, I fucking hate that movie.
right, right, right.
So by the time everyone sees the movie and you see what people's reactions are, it's just brutal. It like hurts so much. And to know that it's one thing when you make an indie movie and you have certain restrictions and you get to the end and it's not everything that you always hoped and dreamed it would be, because you didn't have all the resources in the world. But when you know that there's a version of the movie that's better and that's not the one that got released, that's the hard part.
Right.
And I think what's also really tricky about the whole studio world is that at the end of the day, my movie, The Grudge, cost $10 million. It made $100 million, and it's considered a flop. It's considered an unsuccessful movie because the Sarah Michelle Gellar Grudge made $400 million, and it's you get into this world where it's like, Eyes of My Mother made $26,000, and that's like the best movie I've made, and so it starts to really trip me out is my most financially successful movie is my worst movie. my least financially successful movie is my best movie. And how do you rectify that?
Yeah.
You know, like, and and so after The Grudge,
Did you go
I
into
just kind
did you after like that experience, did you go into a place of discouragement? Were you able to what you know, I think of this because I have a feeling that we're all gonna have a moment like this in this industry. So I guess what I'm asking is what's your advice to not let that kind of get to you and be like, you know,
I
I'm
mean, my first reaction was I have to go back to the thing that I know that I can do. Like the I know that I can make a unique indie movie that is my taste. And if it's no one else's taste, whoops. But at least I can make something for me. Um, and so I also knew that I needed like I kind of needed time just to like recalibrate uh what I wanted to make. I spent 4 years making The Grudge. So it was, and in that time, I had moved across the country. Like my life was so different. I just needed time, like not direct. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do next. So I took a writing job to just like write a script for hire for Blumhouse. And like so that I wasn't not doing anything, but wasn't writing towards directing. I was just writing a script and was gonna high five them when it was done and leave. And if they wanted to make it with someone, they could. And but I knew I wasn't gonna direct it, and it was kind of freeing to be like I'm doing something creative, but I don't have to go make this movie.
Mm.
And then the pandemic hit, um, and then as we all were, was in my house for years doing nothing, and I wrote a lot. And I think the nice reset for me was I wrote a lot of the scripts that I had been thinking about for a long time and hadn't had time to write. Um, so, and then getting, and then knowing that production wasn't happening and just writing for me was kind of what got my head back of like, the whole reason I started doing this in the first place was because like the making of the thing is the fun part for me.
Right.
Like the thing that I love is the making of it and the process of making it. The reason why Eyes worked was because I just was enjoying that. And as soon as you're thinking about box office and audience, you're not thinking about the actual fun of the work. So through the pandemic, just getting to write and know that I wasn't making it anytime soon, but just do something purely creative, movie related, but not being worried about like, am I going to sell this script? Is this going to be my next movie? I was like, the world is, we're in fucking lockdown. Like, no one's making anything. Um,
Did any of those
so
scripts turn into Visitation, perhaps?
no, no, Visitation was actually, so I read Visitation after The Grudge. I told my reps, like my agent and my manager, they were like, well, what do you want to do next? And I was like, I can't make another studio movie. I need to make another indie movie. Um, and I was always sort of reluctant to read scripts that I hadn't written myself. Like I didn't love the idea of directing someone else's script. Um, but I was like, I after The Grudge, I was like, I'm never gonna work ever again. Like, no one's gonna hire me ever again.
Oh no.
So I was like, I'll read scripts. So I read Visitation and I loved it. But I wasn't like mentally ready to not do my own script yet. So I said no. Um, and then 2 years later, I was like, I should have never said no to that script. Like I'm still thinking about that script. I love that script. I wish I had done it. I can't believe what an idiot I am. Like I was so stubborn about not directing someone else's script. Like Martin Scorsese directs other people's scripts. Like plenty of people do this. Um, and literally that day that I was like having this crisis, my manager reached out and was like, "This script is going around again. Didn't you love it?" And I was like, "I want it this time. Like, this has to be. This is my movie. Like, it has to be my movie now." And so I pitched on it. Did for every pitch that I do a lookbook. Um, and I pitched it, showed them my lookbook, met with the writer. Um, and then they were like, let's do it. And it happened really fast because um they were like, you know, we need a certain size of actor to finance this. um who do you want to go to? And I'm was kind like sort of friends with Olivia Cook, and House of the Dragon was about to come out. So I was like, let me offer it to Olivia Cook. She said yes instantly and was like, but I have to go shoot season 2. So we have to shoot this movie now. Um, so literally like 2 weeks later, I was on the plane to Ireland, and it all just happened really fast. Um, and honestly, it was really freeing to not write the script. Like I kind of always noticed this when I was in film school. Like I'm sure you've seen this with stuff. Like it's easier when you read someone else's script, it's easier to be like, here are the problems with it,
Right.
than reading your own script and
Precisely.
being like, here are the problems with it.
Yeah.
Because when you write it, you think you figured out, you used to know what the problems
Right.
were, but you think you figured it all out now.
Right.
So you're screwed. And so it was kind of nice to be like, okay, well, I can fix, like I can make this script better, and I can elevate this, and I can do this and this. And you know, and suddenly it was and I wasn't so precious about the script because I hadn't written it. So it's like, yeah, cut that scene. Like I don't have the baggage of knowing what that scene means to me and the personal. It's like, no, I'm just gonna cut the scene because it doesn't make sense narratively. Um and it was, and so like, you know, ultimately, like, yeah, I'm sitting on a stack of scripts from the pandemic, but if anything, I look at it as like exercise, you know, to practice. Like you do get stale if you're not, as a writer, if you're not writing, you do get stale. Um and um and I think it was also just to like get me back. The thing that I have to constantly like remind myself is the the more you start making movies, the less movies you end up watching, just because time. Like I have, I've been home since visitation for 5 weeks. I haven't watched a single movie in the time that I've been home because I'm editing constantly, and when I finish editing, I like want to go watch Seinfeld, not a
Something.
David Lynch movie,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And so, and you hear a lot of directors say that, how like the more successful you get, the less you watch. And I always, when I'm shooting, try to watch certain like there are certain movies that I watch every time I make a movie. I always watch Mulholland Drive, I always watch Stoker, and I always watch Donnie Darko. Like for whatever reason,
I
the
love all
like
of these.
Mulholland Drive and Donnie Darko were my favorite movies when I was a teenager. And I use those movies to like ground me in remembering what it was like before this was a job. And like when all I did was love movies, what did I love and
Mhm.
why did I love those things? But I think the hardest thing is like reminding yourself what you love. And it sounds so weird. It's like, how can you forget what your taste is? Not that you forget, but it just gets clouded when you're no longer a movie fan. I can't watch a movie and separate the filmmaking from the movie anymore,
Yeah.
and I think that doesn't, that's not, has nothing to do with being a director. It comes from film school too. Like at a certain point, you switch a thing in your brain when you're being analytical about everything you watch. So like, yeah, there's certain movies like if I'm watching like Michael Bay's Ambulance. Well, actually, that's a bad example because I was thinking about the sin. I was like, how'd they get these drone shots? But like, there are certain movies that you could turn your brain off. But it's really hard to separate the filmmaking from like the enjoyment of watching the movie. And I think for me, it's always like remind yourself what what you liked as a fan, not as a filmmaker, and then also come to grips with there's a difference in what you're good at making and what you love. Um, and they don't have to be the same thing. There's obviously going to be a connection, but there's plenty of movies that I love that like I would do a bad job directing. And I think that that was kind of a hard thing um, for me to realize. Like the same way, like I also like drawing, right? And I can't draw realistic. Like when I draw, it looks cartoony. Um, I love Caravaggio. I would love to be able to do that, but I just can't do that. Like that's just not my skill set. And my skill set is for something else. And the same thing with filmmaking. So I think like the weirdest thing about filmmaking is that like as filmmakers, we have to grow publicly. We have to like figure out our art in front of people. When a musician records a song, they can trash a bunch of songs. No one ever has to hear them. Uh, and no one will know that like the first 20 songs you wrote were terrible. As a director, if I make a movie and someone spent money on it, someone's gonna fucking see that movie. So every piece of shit that I make, every bad music video I ever made is still on the internet. Like if you have to learn your craft in front of people, and I
True.
think that that's hard, especially nowadays, because when people talk about Martin Scorsese, no one's like, "Hey, you remember Boxcar Bertha? That movie sucked." And it's like his third movie. No one talks about anything before Taxi Driver. But there's like 5 movies before Taxi Driver. Cronenberg has like 12 movies before Videodrome that no one's ever heard of.
This
And there
this
was an era.
this
What
reminds
were you gonna say?
this reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you that maybe you can delve into with you finishing this thought is what happened to your graduation film? What happened to your thesis film? Was it a success? Did it get you anywhere? What we are doing right now, we're all in editing phases, by the way. I've shot my
Yeah,
thesis, it's there. What we're doing right now gonna do something for us?
yeah. So I think that when I was in school, everyone was like, we want to get our shorts into festivals. Like Cannes has like a short section. We want to get into Tribeca. We want to do Sundance, Slam Dance, like festivals, Student Academy Awards. Like that's what everyone's focus was. Um, I didn't. I think I submitted to Cannes and didn't get in. And then I don't think I submitted to any other film festivals. My thing was like, this is going to be my calling card. I need to be able to prove to someone that I can make something. And it's what I showed every single band to get my first music video jobs. It's what I showed the producers who made Eyes of My Mother when they were like, have you done anything narrative before? Um, it just was a thing that I was really proud of, that I loved showing people and was unique, and you saw a thing that, like, my movie was about like um a janitor at a hospital who's like in his 70s, who's convinced that when he was a kid he was abducted by aliens, and one of the nurses that works at the hospital was also abducted with him. And the movie starts and you think that it's this like weird creepy guy courting this woman, and then like on their first date he like unloads this on her and she's like, oh my god, there's a crazy man working here. And but it felt really authentically like it was a 70s movie. Like I had gotten Kodak film from the
Wow.
70s. We shot like everything just really 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 looked like it wasn't like we're it's 70s movie vibed. It literally looked straight like it was made in the 70s. So
Right.
when I made music videos, I was like, this is my thing. I make things that look like they were made 40 years ago. And it got me jobs. And I think that, you know, for anyone making shorts, the festival stuff is not the end all be all. You know, it's not, sure, it'll get you attention. But it to me it's always more of a thing to just show what you can make, because I left film school with, you know, I don't know how many movies you guys have made over your time there. I don't want you, we made a lot of movies, but when you're like you're still learning, there's plenty of movies that I made in film school that I'm like not trying to show anyone, you
Yeah.
know. i
Yeah.
had one I had one thing that I had put so much effort into that was me, and I could show to people. And that to me is more important than making something that's going to get you into a festival, that's going to get you reps, that's going to get you a feature based on that short. Like just show people that you do something interesting, you
Yeah.
know. And and that's like it's and it's your opportunity to like be you know. And I think especially you I'm sure, like I know at NYU, like, and I feel like this happens at every film school, there's definitely like something, a type of movie that everyone gravitates towards. And like when I was at NYU, it was very much like suicide, like
Gosh,
suicide and
no
eating
idea.
disorders.
You
um
have no idea how
and
many scripts we've gotten in classrooms. It's like this person kills themselves, this person has depression,
yeah,
this person wants to jump off a building. Yeah.
yeah. And so it was a lot of that kind of shit, and like taking itself so seriously. And at NYU, no one does genre stuff. Like everyone's doing like indie dramas. That's what people write, that's what people make. So I was like the weirdo always doing, I in film school I always made sci-fi. Like that was always my thing, was sci-fi. Um and I was like the weirdo. There was like one other kid who made action movies, and we were like the weird ones at NYU. But I was like, I have to be a little bit, like I have to be different somehow. And and yeah, and so that short isn't online anywhere. It never came out anywhere, but I've showed a lot of people, and it got me work. So it did its job, you know.
Right. But it doesn't stop at festivals. It can still be a thing that helps you get jobs, and that's
Yeah,
really good to hear.
yeah.
I guess lastly, I got three things. I want to ask if you could mention something in the back of your head, a good experience you've had in filmmaking in general, production, post-production, preparation, and a bad experience and how you handled it. Maybe it's a creative conflict, dispute, some difficulty that you would suspect all of us kind of are going to face at one point, and how you handled it.
Yeah. Let me think. So I mean, good experience. Um, I hated being on set when I was in film school. Um, Being on set was just so stressful to me, like between racing against the clock, but also having like crew that some of them are your friends and some of them really want to be there, but then some of them are like, when are we done?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm ready to go home whenever you are. So you tell me.
Yeah.
And and it was just so stressful also because like, the nature of film production is it's just like constant problem solving. And in film
Right.
school, you haven't seen all the problems yet. So like all of a sudden you're hit with something and you have no idea what the solution is. Um, and so I just hate it. Was just so stressful to me. And even on music videos, especially because like the bands wouldn't respect call time. So now you're like, you had 12 hours to shoot. Now you have 8 hours to shoot.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I just hated being on set. And then when I made Eyes of My Mother, and and I had also never done a shoot for like longer than 2 days. Like I had done 2 day music videos. My short in film school I had shot for 2 days, but I had never shot for longer than that. And so when I was making my first movie, I remember like at the end of the first week, I was like, something really changes when you're there for longer. And it becomes so much more about like creating the space to have fun and discover things, have enough of a plan that when you don't know the answer to something and you don't have a wacky idea, that your plan works, right?
Uh-huh.
Like you could just shoot your plan and your plan is sound
The
and
shot
it will
list.
work and you will make your day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But create an environment where it's okay to be like, we're throwing out the plan and change. And when it works, like the first moment of like doing something different than the plan and feeling the whole crew be like, oh, oh, that's cool, let's do it like that, and now everyone's excited and now we're all excited about this new idea, and not being the person who like, okay, now I got to go pick up 7 apple boxes and break down a couple C stands so we could go over here. It's like, no, you're the director, just sit there and everyone will do that. Like it was the first time that I like watched the movie machine work in my favor, and it taught me everything of like, be plan meticulously but then be loose. And I hadn't done that on The Grudge because they were like, we need storyboards for every shot. You have to stick to the plan. This is a studio movie. We have to approve everything. Cool. Great. Did that. It worked as well as it could. But then this time when I did Visitation, I was like, go back to just being loose again. And know that, trust that you hired people um, that are going to do the work well. And so like, my favorite moments, my best experiences are when you change the plan, it works, and you watch that first take and you're like, yeah, that was a good idea that I just came up with on the spot. It worked. It feels good. And that scene is better just because I trusted the random thought. And it's like when you're sitting on set and you're watching, and in the back of your head, you're like, this could be better. But there's like 90 other things that you're more worried about. So you let that like one thing go. And the moment that you're like, you know what? No, I'm not going to let it go. I'm just going to chase how to fix this thing. And watching it really work. And so, like, specifically, like, um, there was um there's a scene in Visitation where um a character is like trying to drown another character in the sea. So we're shooting in Ireland, it's February, the sea is literally freezing. And we have to have actors in the sea. We've always planned for this. Um and We had shot listed, storyboarded, planned everything down to the T. And then day of, I watched the rehearsal And I was like, I bet you if I tell the actors we're only going to do this once, no matter what happens, we're only going to do it once. We have two cameras. They will go so hard knowing that they only have to do it once. And I'll make sure I'm going to shoot it in a way that sound won't be usable, but sound probably wasn't going to be usable anyway because we're in the water and it's all splashy. And I'm going to literally stand with my hand on the camera operator's shoulder and be like, okay, turn, 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 go right, duck down. And like, I'm going to yell through this entire shot at the actors, at the camera. And I was like, I said to my crew, I was like, I know this sounds like nonsense, but trust me, I think this will work. And if it doesn't work, the scene doesn't end up in the movie. But I think this is going to work. And we did it how I thought we should do it. And it was fucking great. And exactly what I thought would happen happened. The actors were like so in it because they were like, because not only were they like, I only have to do this once and it's torturous, but they also knew that like whatever I do here is ending up in the movie. So
Right.
this has to be good. And we put so much pressure on everyone, but everyone stepped up to the occasion and it felt like a military operation that we were making up as we went along. But it was like pure filmmaking of just like capturing the moment the way it felt right on the day, doing and it worked. And we watched it and we were like, yes, that was awesome and not at all how we planned on doing it. And so like that, those moments to me are always um my favorites of just like discovery and trusting yourself. And it doesn't come with experience. It's like you can do that shit on your first movie ever. You know, all you need is to be like, I think this is an idea that works. And as the director, that's all your job is to be like, I have an idea. And it's a gamble on like the stakes are always different, you know, but like trusting yourself and leaning into the thing, the experiment and it working is always the most fun. Um, and kind of like on the flip side, like my hardest moments on set are when something isn't working and you don't know why. When I was doing The Grudge, we were doing a scene that the it was basically just like it was a dialogue scene. Character comes into a police precinct. There's dialogue that happens, and tucked inside that dialogue is exposition that we needed to get through. Um, and we're shooting the scene, and it like the shots are feeling weird. So okay, switch up the blocking. Let's try something different. We switch up the blocking. The scene just like and I have no idea why it's not working. Just something just like it doesn't feel like a real scene. Something feels awkward. The actors, the performances are all fine. It's just one of those intangible, like this just doesn't work and I don't know how to fix it.
Mhm.
So my first thing is always my DP has shot all my movies. So I go to my DP and I'm like, Zach, what's wrong here? And then he'll have some ideas. Okay, well, on this day, that scene, his ideas didn't work either. So now I'm starting to feel the pressure of like, we're just standing here. Everyone can tell we don't know what we're doing. The actors are just waiting for me to come up with something. Um, and I everyone's just like standing around and like we have to do something. Um, so in the moment, I was just like, I'm just gonna shoot something different so that it feels like we've solved the problem to everyone else. And while we're shooting that, I'm not gonna pay attention and I'm just gonna try to fix this in my head. Well, long story short, nothing worked. Nothing about this scene worked. And I went to lunch being like,
Fist.
I just fucking botched that scene. That scene doesn't work even a little bit. Um, Everyone knows it. Everyone knows I'm a fucking fraud and I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh
And
no.
I just couldn't figure out that scene. And now we just have to move on. And that's that. And for the rest of the day, I just couldn't get it out of my head that, like, you fucked that scene up. Like, that scene, and you need that scene in the movie. Like, it's not a scene where it's like, whatever, it didn't work, cut it. It's like,
Right.
well, and it's like, Nick, what are you gonna do? Well, I got to the edit room and I watched the editor's assembly of it, and I was like, oh, there's no problems with that scene. And you realize that, like, when you're on set, you're so focused on like what's happening in front of the camera right now, and you forget how much editing does to the footage that you are
I mean,
shooting.
that's kind of
um
what they tell us though, right? That's kind of what people say, is that don't worry about, don't ever say we'll fix it in post, is what people say.
yeah,
Yeah. So
but like, but you can, you know. And then, so now there's always scenes where, ever since that, and then watching it work in the edit, anytime I'm like, I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to solve it, I just make sure I get a couple extra shots that are like
yeah.
a single on a character, so that if I need to jump out of this, I have a shot to go to. I can cut the scene short. I can jump through a big chunk of the scene. And so it's always like, if I'm having trouble on set now, you just shoot a safety that will get you through, even if it's an insert, anything that can just be disconnected from the rest of the scene. But I'll never forget that, like, 4 hour period of me being like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know how to solve this. And as I keep saying, your only job as a director is to answer questions. And when you don't have the answer, you're like, well, why the fuck am I here? And why are they listening to me?
Right.
Um, but I think that, like, it was good for me to have that and then watch it work. And then listen, there are also times when you shoot a scene and you think it's amazing, and then you watch the cut and you're like,
True. True.
oh, what did I do? And I think that, like, the biggest thing is, if you surround yourself with people that you trust, they're going to fix a lot of your mistakes. And as the director, you get to take credit for everyone else's good work. And, so it's like, I'm someone who takes advice and notes and ideas from everyone. Like, I don't care whether you're the PA, the DP, the editor, a grip. If you have an idea, I don't have to take it. Like, I can be like, oh, cool. No, I don't know if that works, but thank you. Or take it and be like, damn, sick. That was a great idea. Thank you for that.
Right.
And but I think that being on set, especially on a movie, you do every day is so different, and you're faced with so many different problems, that I think the thing now that I also realize that I wish I had known earlier is that it's super okay to say, I don't know, or give me a second. I don't have an answer for you right now. I need to think about it. I always felt like if someone was like, should it be this or this? I need to be able to say, make it this right then and there.
Right.
And and sometimes, because of certain situations, you might need to, and it might be a split decision, and then you just trust your gut and you go with it. But it's totally fine to be like, I don't know. And if I had been in the situation that I was in on the Grudge with that scene, now the way I would handle it is, I also, in that particular moment, was worried about the actors knowing that I didn't know what I was doing.
Yes.
So I wasn't cluing them into my problem.
Mhm.
Now what I do is I bring everyone together and I'm like, hey, this isn't working and I don't know why, and I don't have a solution to fix it. Let's all talk about it. And and then all of a sudden the actor will be like, when I did this, the blocking to me just felt like it felt wrong. It's like, okay, cool, let's start there, let's take that out, let's do something different there. And then now suddenly you're in a dialogue with everyone, and it's like, anytime you don't know the answer, open it to everyone. And I think that like I gained more being able to tell people I don't know and having them be like, oh wow, he's not like posturing and pretending he knows shit he doesn't know. um I think you gain a lot of respect when you're like, help me, like I need help right now, let's all try to figure this out together. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back.
Or
Oh, welcome home. I'm back. I should have warned you when we started that I talk a lot.
no, I appreciate. I talk a lot too, so I
So
appreciate it. Um, thank you so much, and I don't want to take more of your time. I really, really, really appreciate the time and space you've.
yeah,
Oh my God, I
absolutely.
also just
I
we've.
hope I answered at least some of your questions.
Oh,
I know I
many
just like
of them,
talked a lot.
many of them.
Good.
But I'm reacting to seeing what I believe is your dog, which is
Oh
adorable.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she just came home for a walk.
um, thank you so much, Nick. And
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I know you made The Eyes of My Mother, and it became your feature at around the same age as I am right now. I'm 26, so in a way I've always looked up to you. Once I saw that film,
Oh,
once I
thanks.
saw it, and I looked you up after watching the film, and I saw who you are, and you were an NYU graduate. I was like, this is what I really want to do. Like, this is possible. Um, you'll definitely hear from me.
Yeah,
Because
please.
I
And
want to.
so you're editing your film now?
Yeah, well, my film is a little bit. I'm a huge fan of horror, but for my thesis, to talk a little bit about myself, so in film school, I started grad film school with my dad being alive, and then he passed away while I'm still in film school, during the pandemic, but not because of the pandemic. He was an old man. So for my thesis, I thought, you know what, to commemorate this, I will tell the story of how I kind of handled it, because I received the news abroad while I'm in America here, and my dad is used to live in Kuwait, was living in Kuwait at the time, and I received the news from my roommate, and she knocks on my door, and I open my door here in Brooklyn, and they kind of just tell me, and that's how I open my film. Is me. I also lead in it because I held auditions. I felt like nobody was getting the
No
gist.
one got it.
No,
Yeah.
so I hated it because I was like, I need to be behind the camera and in front of it, and I had a team of people, and I was like, no, you can't look at this one, you'll look at it later, trust us. So it was a vulnerable moment where, and the film starts with me opening the door, and just being told your dad's dead, and then that's how the movie begins, and navigating grief
Cool.
being abroad. um but I'm a huge fan of horror, and I want to talk to you later in the future about perhaps some Arabic cultural horror stories, because we have so
Cool.
much jinn stuff.
Yeah.
And I think with the right mind, we can work on something. But I really, really, really appreciate your time, and I admire your work, and your successes like totally bring me joy, because I look up to you, and you're kind of our generation, so it's fun
Well,
to have somebody look
thank
up to you
you.
that's not far off or untouchable.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate I'm glad that I inspired you. I appreciate the fandom. I always I'm like, do people have people seen my movies? I don't know.
I walk and tell
Um,
people about The Eyes of My Mother. I literally advertise
good.
that movie, like it's so good.
Um, but yeah, like I said before, I think my biggest thing is like use your use your short as a calling card, and like don't ask for permission. All you need is money, and the only way you get money is by asking for it. Never spend your own money. And
Too late.
um well, in film school it's a different story. When you're in film school, that's all you're spending. But like, and I think and then the biggest thing is just like do you, like just make it for you, and that's what's going to make it. There's someone else like you somewhere, and there's probably more of you than you think there are, so it's like make everything for you and hope that it finds the audience, and like don't worry about anything else. um and as long like I can live with a movie like Piercing is a movie that I love. That definitely is my least seen movie, but I love that movie. So I don't care if people hate it. I don't care if journalists shit on it. I don't care what bad thing anyone says about it because I love the movie. And it's so much easier to stand there next to a movie that you love, no matter what happens to it, than a movie that you're like, I wish I had done something differently. But so just make it for you, make yourself love it, and you will be mentally healthier.
Well said. That's actually very, very good advice because our focus right now
Yeah.
is festivals, is appealing to people. So it's really good to hear this.
Yeah.
Cool. And if I want to
Yeah.
send you a couple of my work in the future once it's done, just to get your opinion on it, do
Yeah.
I send it? I send it to the same. I forgot her name. She was so nice. Oh my God, by the way.
Yeah, Samantha.
So
That's
nice.
probably the easiest way, because
Cool.
my manager will get me everything.
Cool. I'll just shoot Samantha an
Yeah.
email with my work to get your opinion on it. But
Yeah.
thank you so much, Nick,
Yeah.
and you have a
Thank
great.
you. Happy to chat. Hope I didn't say anything crazy. I don't know if you're showing your class this or do what you're doing with this, but I hope I didn't say anything
I don't think you
nuts.
did.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Talk soon. Bye.